black Jackson. Come on, little black Jackson. Come on, little black Jackson. Come on.
Hey everyone, and welcome to La Roche FM, a podcast where design and business meet in the same place. Weekly talks with industry experts on how they do it. Let's begin the show. Today, I have the pleasure of speaking with Charlie Waite. Hello, Charlie.
Hey, how's it going?
Doing great. And you?
Doing well. Thanks for having me.
Can you introduce yourself?
Yeah, I'm a professional husband and father. That's kind of my full-time job. Love surfing and a former professional baseball player. And then I run the UX team at GoPro. That's kind of my day job and what pays the bills.
You also previously worked as an in-house designer for an agency. What did motivate you to go from an agency life to a full-time in-house designer?
Yeah, so I think for me, when I was at Focus Lab, and then previously I was doing agencies since my design career started. And at Focus Lab, we started to dive into a little bit more product-focused work, which really was really exciting. We were starting to have longer engagements with companies, kind of like their in-house design team. And that whole world just started to kind of open up, along with some opportunities. There was some nice ties getting me back to California. At the time, my family and we moved to Alabama. So with everything happening in the tech community, kind of back on the West Coast, that was a nice tie. But yeah, it was just really about kind of switching gears. Had been doing agency life or agency work my whole life.
Mm-hmm.
So just wanted to try something different, something new.
So you mentioned that you're an ex-professional baseball player, right?
Yeah.
So how is that you went into the design world? Because you said that you're really into surfing, baseball, and this kind of stuff. How did you get into the creative world?
I often tell people I just got super lucky and kind of fell into it. I think that's pretty similar to a lot of people that got started in the industry back when I did, which was like 2004. Mm-hmm. I basically had a whole nother life and career plan, and it was all centered around baseball. From when I was like 5 years old to 24-ish, baseball was the only thing I cared about, the only thing I wanted to do. It was my only career plan. But like all good things, sometimes they come to an end. And luckily I just had been a design and art major in college. Something I was always passionate about as a kid, drawing. And, I remember growing up like redesigning logos for different sports teams and just trying to be as creative as possible. My grandfather was a painter and really good, like working with his hands. People in my family like really deep in like ceramics. So that creative world was always around me and something I always really loved. So it felt like, gosh, I get to college, I get to choose what I get to do. And I was like, okay, I'll try art. But at the time, web design was just kind of becoming a thing. There wasn't really anything about UX design or anything like that. There was traditional graphic design for print for sure. But I always had kind of like a love for technology as well. So I started to see those worlds start to blend a little bit, and ended up taking a couple web design classes, I think like Flash classes, and like learning like, learning like Illustrator and Photoshop. And I was just kind of like, oh, this is rad. Like getting to blend the technology side and the creative side was a really interesting tie to me.
Right now, I see that you're like a perfect fit for the GoPro. But you love sports. You're into design.
Yeah, right. Perfect ad.
How big is your design team at GoPro?
Yeah, we're about 15 or 16 people on my team. The design org itself is closer to about 40. I run the experience design for software, so mobile, desktop, and web apps. Mm-hmm. But then we also have design for our hardware products, so all the cameras, whether it be on the back of the screen or the front of the screen, or excuse me, back of the camera, front of the camera. And then we also have marketing and brand, and then we have like a traditional ID industrial design team that's designing like the physical cameras themselves.
So how each team works? I mean, you have somebody, the head of the team, and then you have is it linear or you multiple levels?
Yeah, so it's kind of broken down where we have a VP of design, and then from there it sprouts off into 4 groups. We have the ID team, which is led by a director, the hardware team led by a director, software, which is myself, and then we also have kind of an innovation think tank group, which is a little bit smaller team, but yeah, again, so that's kind of the way the structure is broken up.
I get it. The company, of course, works on multiple products, physical products and mobile like interfaces and so on. What's really interesting and what I'm curious about is how does your company keep this creative spirit alive? I mean, how do you motivate creativity in your company? How do you create a creative culture?
You know, it's tough sometimes, right? I mean, you get so caught up in the execution sometimes and focused in on that. Like, where do you kind of take the time and branch out into that creative space? I think for us, you know, we get to play in a really creative world. You know, our whole mission is getting people to get out and live their life and capture moments, and then we're going to give you the tools, whether it be on the capture side or the edit side, to be creative and make a memory from that. So we're pretty much always in that creative mindset, and I think it's something that, you know, we do really well here at GoPro. You know, the culture is really about doing and making, and always kind of tinkering and trying new things, and no idea is too crazy or too far-fetched. So the more creative, the better.
What do you think is something unique about your specific design approach that's different from other companies?
It's always hard to say it's different than other companies, having it really only been at GoPro as far as in-house. Trying to think if there's anything. I think the biggest thing for us is, you know, our philosophy is we're building really technically advanced products, whether it's on the capture side or the edit side of, you know, in post. But how do we kind of get out of the user's way to allow them to enjoy the moment? I think, you know, the phones and the cameras have gotten so good, but there's always this barrier in between you and the subject. And something that's always been so amazing about GoPro is being able to mount it and it just be kind of like your little buddy with you. So really just kind of taking that approach, and whether that's in the mobile app or if it's in the camera, how we design that. I think we really want to be that little buddy that's there with you, but not interrupting the moment. So how do we capture that? You know?
So you would say that the design philosophy would be the product should be that simple. I mean, just don't get in the way.
Exactly.
Right? Yeah, I get it.
Yeah, right. I mean, it's kind of the set it and forget it type of a mindset. You know, all the way through the process of capturing, and then when you go through and make an edit, which has been really nice with, you know, the addition to Quick and these auto edits that we're able to produce. You know, it's the legwork that you have to do now to get a really awesome video is very minimal. Now you can dive deeper and edit and fine tune and spend hours. I know I've done that before, but you don't have to, which is really awesome.
One thing that I really wanted to talk with you about is the user experience. So I believe there are multiple definitions on what user experience is, and different professionals, have their own definition of what it is. And can we go more in depth? What's user experience for you?
Yeah, it is funny. It's one of those words that came about and kind of defining a lot of what we do in product design. And it was something that I grew up my first design job. I mean, we were all kind of doing that, and then it became like this label. And I think along the way, sometimes it gets a little narrow. Like there's like job titles, it's like UX designer. And to your question, it's like, well, what does that even mean? Like, it's very specific. So I think for me, having good UX is just not just, it embodies all the disciplines, visual design, motion, interaction, just understanding where the customer's pain points are and solving those. It's a really big bucket. And I think that's why it's kind of hard to define sometimes, or when you ask people, it's interpreted very differently. So for me, I think at the core, it's just really unblocking the user and getting out of the way and understanding the user's intent with the product that you're building. For us, for GoPro, like we touched on, it's getting out of their way so that they can live the moment, and then provide them something after that moment that is an accurate representation that they can enjoy and relive whenever. So I think that's what really at the core of it is. For me, it's just really unblocking, giving them ease of use throughout these different workflows. But it really starts with the customer and understanding what their intent is.
So what specific fields does it encompass? I mean, like the entire list of design fields, I guess, right? That work in between.
Yeah, I mean, I think I'm not only just design, right? I think that's where people make a massive mistake sometimes, is just thinking it's just a design thing. Some of our best UX thinkers are engineers at GoPro. Research, content, copy, all these different disciplines that I think people are kind of give to just design, I think is a little bit unfair. I'm a fan of this idea that everybody's a designer. I think everybody has a point of view. Now, design teams are definitely the experts and should be treated that way, just like engineering is the expert in their field. But yeah, it's just definitely not just a design team. And I think that's why you see some product design teams that consist of, like, their orgs are, UX research, UX content, copy, like they're all part of this larger UX org, which I think makes a lot of sense.
Mm-hmm. So when, for example, you try to create a certain, let's say, user experience, do you involve different team members from different departments, like copy, engineering, and so on, when working on this kind of?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I think I think for me, copy was always that big one that I didn't realize the impact early on in my career, but just realizing how you actually speak to a user and is just as important as what that workflow is and how many screens and what the visual design looks like, or the animations or really the functionality it's built upon. And then understanding just from a research standpoint, early on, how involved it is, or how great it is to have them involved early, so your assumptions are based off of data, and then you're validating throughout the process. But yeah, I think the optimum design sprint or kickoff for us is involving all the disciplines. So you have a point of view and understanding of technical constraints and what our data is, and looking at the solution from a ecosystem or holistic view, rather than just a design point of view.
Got it. You reminded me the advertising agencies, which have as teams art directors and copywriters, so they work in pairs and twos. So the art directors comes with visual ideas, and the copywriter does the entire research and the copy, how the entire illustration should speak and so on. Yeah, it's a pretty interesting approach.
Yeah, no, it's awesome, and I think really at the core of it, it's having really different point of views from these different disciplines that allows you to get to the best product, and you understand that it's more than just one of these to build something successful. And I think that's why you see the companies out there, the Instagrams and Facebooks and things like that are building really, really great quality products, and it's because they do these types of things.
I once heard from a design director that we should not always strive creating pleasant and good user experiences in the end, because sometimes people also love challenges. What do you think about that one?
Yeah, it'd be interesting to know the background and the product or agency the person was working at. I can kind of maybe piece together where somebody would be coming from with that.
So, for
I think
example,
it really depends.
the example actually he was talking about, he was giving an example actually with puzzles. People
Mm,
sometimes enjoy the process of building up those puzzles. I mean, it takes
for
time to
sure.
find that fitting piece, and just, I mean, it takes time, and it's really annoying because you can't find really fast
Yeah,
everything. But people
yeah.
sometimes enjoy it. I mean, building, it takes time and effort to build something. What do you think about this?
Yeah, definitely. I think if you look at something like Snapchat, right? Like
Hmm.
you could argue the UX on that is really poor from, like a standard UX book way of thinking. But obviously one of the most popular apps. And I think people really enjoyed the fact that it was hard or weird to figure out. But I think it really depends on the value of the product,
Hmm.
which then allows people to have that forgiveness and want to learn. Obviously, millions and millions of people thought there was a ton of value in Snapchat, so those UX hurdles and that gamifying it was fun to them.
Hmm.
If you put that same mindset into GoPro's universe and said like, oh, we're gonna do that in like an editing video capacity, I mean, it would fail
Yeah,
completely.
yeah.
So it really depends. It really depends in the space that you're at. So yeah, I could totally understand where somebody's coming from, and I think a lot of that comes from like differentiating experiences as well. Like maybe you're looking for a way to flip it, and again use the Snapchat world. They were trying to change the way we communicate with each other. So it is interesting. I think there's always it always depends on the customer and the product that you're building.
Hmm.
But going back to kind of how we define UX, I think it's the same way, right? It's this wide open world, and it really comes back to the customer that you're targeting.
Hmm.
What the best UX for GoPro is not going to be the best for Facebook, which isn't going to be the best for Pinterest, right?
You mentioned customer a lot, so you say that customer is the one you should understand and like design the experience around him in the end.
Yeah, I mean, it all starts with the customer and understanding the customer intent and their workflows. And you're not necessarily, and maybe kind of going back to what we were just talking about, beholden to the customer. You're not always asking the customer, "Oh, what do you want? What do you want?"
Hmm.
There's a lot of things that you can lead and get customers to do by understanding who they are and what they're trying to do in the
Hmm.
space. But yeah, I mean, I think we're building products for our customers, and you have to understand who they are and what their intent is and why they think your product's valuable, to really design an experience that they're going to enjoy and make a part of their daily use.
Hmm. Hmm. So let's take then as an example the GoPro app. How, for example, was your approach on working on the GoPro app? I mean, you have certain goals in mind when starting working on it, or how's the process?
Yeah, I think for us, we kind of touched on it a little bit earlier. It's really about how do we, from an app standpoint, give the user the tools they need to create a long-lasting moment or memory from the footage that they captured. And we've iterated on the app for I've been at GoPro now for about 3 years or so, and
Hmm.
um, we've been iterating and working over that time to really figure out what is the best way to do that and what are the workflows that our customers want. Um, and we recently launched Quick Stories, which is basically an auto edit of your footage. And through a lot of research and iteration, we found that video editing especially is really difficult for customers to understand and get into. Of course, like professional people are fine doing it, but that's only a small percentage of our customers. We've got somebody like my wife who uses a GoPro, or somebody that that's not proficient in technology, and figuring out ways that they can get the benefits out of video editing, but through a different workflow. So I think for us, again, it's just kind of enabling our customers, understanding, yeah, they want this amazing output that they see in our commercials, and our brand is so strong that that's what gets them to go buy the camera.
Yeah.
But how do we get them to be successful in showcasing something like that? And it was really just, giving them or taking away that blank slate, right? Mm-hmm. So that was a big thing that we found is just by giving somebody a starting point, it actually becomes a much more pleasant user experience, and they're much more engaged with it because they're already kind of seeing like the output in a way, and now they can kind of come in and tinker a little bit. Maybe they change an edit here or a clip here. It's very, I think Instagram obviously did a great job with this, right? It made pretty much everybody a professional photographer overnight. Here's a couple of filters and post it, and here's the 1,000 likes. So we were kind of looking for something along the same lines.
So you want to make the app simple for everybody to can understand it and just use it in the end.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's more than just simple. I think it's giving them value up front rather than making them work for it. I think in this kind of hasty world we live in this instant gratification, it's hard for people to put in time to things these days that they don't instantly see the value from. Yeah. And by just kind of switching the perspective of saying, like, instead of going through the media gallery and selecting a bunch of things and then put it into an edit and move things around, we actually just flipped it and said, well, let's give you the output first. Yeah. And then you can kind of go in and take things away or add things. But you instantly get that wow moment, that like, oh, wow, like I was just experiencing, the pumpkin patch with my kids, or skydiving, or my kid's soccer game, whatever it was, and now it's instantly in a couple minutes back to me as a full video is pretty empowering.
Oh, I get the idea. I think I noticed something like Google Photos does the same thing. I was getting constantly notifications. Hey, here's your last album or video mesh we make, animation, this kind of stuff.
Yeah. So yeah, no, it's pretty cool for sure.
So for you, it's the same thing. I mean, if somebody shoots, let's say, a couple of videos in one day, you just combine them and just create them in a movie after that.
Yeah, I mean, there's some amazing technology that kind of empowers that and makes the edits better with algorithms and things like that. But yeah, the crux of it, I mean, it really is. It's about. I think one of the big challenges that we've always had is. The camera's always been so great and easy to use, but then like, what do you do with the footage afterwards? Yeah. It was always a tough problem, and we kind of played around with tons of different ideas, and it's really like you weren't getting the payoff of using the camera, because you're getting a lot of footage, but then it would sit on the SD card or the hard drive. Yeah. And then once we kind of tapped into quick storage, I think we really started to see that the users were getting more out of every time they hit the shutter button. Yeah. Every piece of media became valuable, which is really awesome. When you can start associating value with each click, that's pretty great.
With Alexa, Google Home, and then Apple coming with their pod, do you think we will have to eventually switch from user interfaces to voice interfaces, or user interfaces are going to still remain, going to be, useful for at least next 10 to 20 years, or in the future even?
Yeah, I kind of feel like UI and device and screens will be around in some form. I mean, you look at TVs. TVs have been here for I don't know how many years now. Long. Since what, the 50s, right?
I think there is almost 70, 80 years, something like that, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah. So the idea that a screen interface would go away, I think would be really hard to wrap my head around at least. So I think that will always be there. But with AR and you mentioned voice and these different ways to engage the user and empower the user, I think it's a really actually cool time to be a designer. You can start to play in these different spaces. Just touching on voice a little bit. So our Hero 5 camera was the first voice-enabled camera, and Hero 6, which we just launched, has it as well. So you can just say GoPro take a photo or GoPro take a video, which is amazing when you start to think about when the camera's mounted out of reach or isn't nearby somehow. You can actually interact with it and get the that point of view that we're known for in different ways. So you can start to see how that could expand, whether it be on the hardware or in the software. I think voice is a really interesting space.
Because you mentioned that you already started implementing this into GoPro 6. So eventually, if, let's say I'm on a bike, right? I'm riding down the mountain, and of course I'm busy because the speed is fast, and I can I can tell the GoPro start recording, and it's gonna start recording, right?
Yep.
Oh, sounds good.
Yeah.
Sounds interesting.
Yeah, you can turn it off, you can turn it on, you can video burst, you can do all these features with it, which is awesome. It's just looking at different ways to extend the physical buttons and the buttons on the back of the screen. I think that's why like the Alexas and Google Homes are really interesting. But like, I don't know, for me, like Google Assistant and Siri have never really they almost feel harder workflow process. So I think it just depends on the use case and the scenarios. I watch my kids interact with we have an Alexa at home, and how they interact with it, it's very seamless and just kind of second nature to them. But my daughters never use Siri on the phone. So I think doing it thoughtfully and I don't know if voice needs to be everywhere, at least right now. But I think all these different design outputs are really cool, and just a different way to help your product succeed or help the user succeed.
You mentioned your daughter, so it comes to her as something natural to interact with Alexa, right? I mean, she just naturally speaks with Alexa without. Oh, that sounds interesting.
Yeah. We're kind of in the Amazon ecosystem when it comes to groceries and things like that. So it's funny to walk by and daughters telling Alexa to order peanut butter or get more lemonade or something like that. It's become kind of second nature for sure.
Do you think the voice is gonna change how we design things?
I think so. I think, as people start to get more comfortable with it, depending on the product, I mean, it already has, right? Like Alexa, Google Home, these things don't even have screens on them. So the only way to interact with them is through voice. So you can start to see how things can scale back, which is really interesting. But you look at other scenarios like the GoPro. Sometimes it's a little embarrassing to tell your GoPro to take a photo when you're out in public, right?
Yeah.
So I think there's some interesting use cases of when, where, and what you're doing it on. But yeah, I think it's going to unlock a lot of really cool things, in the product space that we probably haven't really even tapped into all that much yet.
So what I can understand from what you're saying, that we're not going to eliminate, let's say, the physical buttons entirely. I mean, they're going to be there because as you mentioned, when you're in the public, you don't want to tell your GoPro and you just want to really just start clicking it.
Yeah. I think what we'll see is just like what we saw with interface design, right? Unlocking features that back in the day, like you take the TV, right? When my dad was growing up and they had the turn dial thing that had like 5 channels, right? And now you have Netflix on your TV, you have app on your TV. I think the scale and what we're able to do will just continue to grow with all these different things. And then we'll also hopefully be able to simplify, right? Maybe a product that had 7 buttons now with voice only needs 2. Or maybe doesn't even need a physical button like like Alexa or Google Home. So I think it's just playing around and seeing what's right for each product or space. But again, it's about, I think a lot of product design and UX is about how do you enable somebody's workflow that they're doing today to be more seamless. And I think that's what you're seeing with some of these products.
I was wondering, in your own experience, because you experienced the agency life, then of course working for big companies in-house, what do you think some companies get wrong about user experience?
Yeah, I don't, that's a tough one. I feel like there's so many good designers now. I've downloaded apps just because they're beautiful or they do something really like amazing. But the product itself doesn't really have a ton of value. And I think that's probably I think that's probably the bigger issue is not necessarily the UX, because I think there's standard, with iOS and material design. I mean, there's so many ways to get to a really clean, delightful user experience. It's whether or not the product itself is valuable. You look at like the top apps in the App Store, they're all based around like communication. Messenger and Snapchat, Instagram, these things. These people find value in communicating to these friends and families and these groups. You take some other apps that are, I'm trying to think of one off the top of my head that's like just amazing. And you want to make it a part of your everyday life, but there's no value there, right? You just don't come back to it enough. And I think that's why, I think that's probably the bigger issue is really understanding like the product you're building, does it solve a real problem for customers? And if it does, then you have a really good chance of succeeding. And that's where I think UX comes in and will help you be competitive in your space, and really attract certain users and get people to adopt. But I think it really does come down to the core value of the product and whether or not it resonates with them.
So, coming to a close now, wanted to ask, what changed your entire perspective on how you work or maybe design things? Maybe it was a book, a person, a talk, and so on.
Yeah, I think I had 2 really big moments in my life. One was just around my personal, how I designed, how I executed on something. I forget, it was either at a conference or talking with some friends, but this idea that sitting in front of your computer or at your desk for 8 hours a day is just a complete waste of time, and changing my idea of like that's being productive to being okay to get up from my desk and go on a walk or go on a run or go to the gym or something, and allow myself just to be a little bit freer so I can think clearly. And then when I came back to my desk, that was more of like an execution mode. And I found myself being much more productive, coming to better solutions, really having like a clear understanding of what I was trying to do rather than kind of just staring at like Sketch or Photoshop or whatever it was, and try to like force it. So that was really powerful just in my personal workflow and how I kind of design today. And I think the other one was when I got to GoPro, was just really having that empathy for users. I think it's hard sometimes to put yourself in the user's shoes, and sitting through like user testing and things and realizing what may seem natural for you is completely foreign to others, and really having the ability to get into that mindset and looking at it from their perspective, I think also was a huge shift. It was one of the reasons I wanted to come to GoPro or a company like GoPro, was because when you were agency, at least at the time, we weren't getting the chance to sit in on usability testing and doing user research. A lot of the stuff that we were doing was just based off assumptions, which is really dangerous, looking back at it now. And, thank goodness that it seemed to work. But I think, I think those were probably the two biggest things. I was really like, I look back in my career that, I would say that have been the most impactful. Just sanity as far as workflow and being able to execute quicker and get to ideas a lot faster. The other was really taking that step back and seeing like, okay, what does a first time experience look like for somebody who's pulling this camera out of the box and they try to pair it with the app? How do you get into that mindset?
What would be some book recommendations from your side? Because we always ask our guests a top 3 on their list.
Yeah, I have a list. Let me pull it up. I'm a terrible reader and I fall asleep all the time. So I much prefer like the books on tape. Trying to think of what are my top ones. So a really good one is Essentialism. I just downloaded that one and started actually today. So I would take a look at that one.
What is it about?
For the product designers out there, I think the Google Design Sprint book is actually really awesome. It really touches on just how Google came to be on doing these design sprints and walks you through. So if you're a younger designer, it's great. So you can start running your own design sprints. Maybe if you're at an agency that you think your process or your design process could be better, that's a really good one. Trying to think if there's any others. I think those are probably some pretty good.
So maybe, I don't know, maybe other podcasts or interviews that you really would recommend?
Yeah. Podcast. Well, obviously this one. I think this one's amazing. You gotta listen to this. I guess people.
So I'm gonna put you as a recommendation. People listen to this podcast. Charlie Waite.
Yes. Listen here. I think. What else do I listen to? High Resolution is really good. A buddy of mine, Jared Arondu. I forget what his co-host name is, so I apologize. But they interviewed VPs of designs and design leads at some really big companies, like Katie Dill when she was at Airbnb, and material design. Trying to think, pretty much all the who's of the design community, which is really awesome. Design Details is also another really good one. Kind of focuses more on just designers in the community. I think they're at like episode 225, so there's tons of content there to dive into. And then I'm a huge Apple fanboy, so I actually listen to Mac Break Weekly, which is Leo Laporte's kind of everything about Apple. And I drive a ton, commuting back and forth from my house to the office, so lots of podcasts.
Charlie, thank you very much for being here today.
Oh, thank you. That was fun.